Let's now move to rugby. The South African Sevens teams have had contrasting fortunes. The men's team, which is commonly known as the Blitzboks, have fallen from grace where they were once champions to a very low in the pecking order world of Sevens rugby. But the women's team have been making a steady rise and have secured Olympic qualifications, which is something the men's team has yet to achieve. Now, to talk about this, we have roped in a reporter who has covered these teams in good and in bad times. Good evening, Jody Hendricks, and welcome to Sports Live.
Good evening, Coley, and thank you for the invite.
I don't think many of us would have envisioned a time when we say the Blitzboks have fallen from grace, but it is the reality that we are faced with. I mean, we look at what Saskok was able to do with our national hockey team, saying they're not good enough to go and compete at the Paris Olympics because they wouldn't finish with a medal. So even if the Blitzboks were to qualify for the Olympics, do we see them in a world where they would even be in a position to fight for a podium finish?
You never know. If we look back at the current season, of course, they started off with a bang, winning in Dubai, and then since then it's been a downhill slope for the team. And of course, a lot of people are asking questions about Sandile Ngobo as coach, also Philip Snyman, the previous captain who's assisting him. And we have to ask these questions because, like you said in your intro, what has gone wrong with the Blitzboks? Once dominating the World 7 Series and now struggling. I think currently they are 10th out of 12 teams on the log, and that's simply not good enough for a team that in the latter part of between 2015 and 2019 dominated Sevens rugby. So definitely a couple of tough questions, and I think Saskok in their assessment of the Blitzboks and their performance on the field, because that's what they'll be judged on, they are asking the right questions. Are they good enough to go to Paris later this year and win a medal for the country? That's a valid question.
I mean, 9th and 11th place finishes in Vancouver and Los Angeles. Absolutely dreadful. But what has happened to the academy, which we were used to, that would churn out quality players for the likes of Neil Powell and Paul True in the past? Where is this talent? Why isn't it coming to the fore?
And that's the million-dollar question. Of course, we have to remember that COVID-19 had a huge impact not only on Sevens rugby, but rugby and sports worldwide. And one of the consequences was that the academy stood still for 2 years. They couldn't get any players through the system. They couldn't attract any players because no Sevens rugby was being played due to COVID-19, 2020, 2021. They only started playing in 2022 again. And so basically the current team, they're sitting with players that they've had to go and recall that played 15s, Roscoe Speckman, because the players weren't coming through the system. And that academy that had so much success for coaches like Neil Powell and Paul True in the past. And that's why I think some of the players in the current squad, if you look at the caliber and you have to be truly honest with yourself, Polly, if you have to ask yourself how many of these players would have made the Sevens team under Neil Powell when they were dominating World Sevens, I think 2, maybe 3 if we're lucky. And so that shows you why they're struggling at the moment.
And of course, for Coach Sandile Ngobo, which is what you also mentioned, you know, at the top of our discussion now, he's at the receiving end of a lot of criticism. Is he truly the only person to be blamed for the downfall of the Blitzboks?
Definitely not. I think it's a systematic failure. Like I said, COVID-19 caused havoc for sports worldwide, and the Blitzboks, we are now seeing...
But Jody, respectfully, COVID-19, when so many other sporting codes also suffered the same misfortunes and have been able to bounce back?
I'm trying to give you context. So take the 2 years, he didn't get any players to do the system. So when he was appointed in late 2022, he took over from Neil Powell after the World Cup that was hosted in Cape Town. He basically got a team of players with very little experience. You'll remember a guy like Werner Kok went to the Sharks. Kwagga Smith went to the Springboks. Chislin Colby was not available anymore because he was in France. Just those 3 names alone. A guy like Roscoe Speckman went to the 15s. He's back now. So I'm trying to give you context about why the current generation of players are not up to standard with an inexperienced coach. So you have to look at the systematic approach of SA Rugby when it comes to the sevens. The players are not good enough, an inexperienced coach, an inexperienced assistant coach, and then you have a recipe for disaster. I'm quite positive at the moment because they've shown last year, I think they won 2 tournaments. This year they won Dubai, and then, like I said, dreadful in Los Angeles and Vancouver, the last 2 tournaments. But if they get it right, they can be a team to be reckoned with on the 7th circuit. Unfortunately for them, and this is where they'll have to learn. Look at what the team like Argentina is currently top of the log, how they've improved in sevens over the last couple of years, how Ireland has improved. France, who won in Los Angeles a week ago, with a player like Anton Dupont, who's rated as one of the best 15 rugby players in the world, who's now decided, I want to play sevens for my country when we host the Olympics later this year. Why can't we get a guy like Colby, a Quagga Smith, seven specialist who's now playing 15s, and say, look at the bigger picture. We want to be successful. They still have an opportunity, I think, in Monaco later this year to qualify for the Olympics. Let's go to Monaco, get a strong team together and see what we can do. Because I think, like you said, otherwise we're going to blame a coach who's been in the job for a year and a half and not look at the bigger picture of why the sevens team is struggling as a whole.
I mean, many reports are also coming through in terms of Ngobo's head being on the chopping block. What do you know so far in terms of that? Could we be seeing a new coach?
Well, definitely not in the middle of the season, so we've still got a couple of tournaments to go. Hopefully they'll qualify to go to Madrid and to play there in the championship, because this year also remember that World Rugby changed the format, so we don't have all the tournaments. We don't have a tournament besides the one in Madrid, for example. So they cut the number of tournaments. A lot of the popular tournaments like in France and England is not happening this year again. So if the team in the next 3 tournaments, I think that's left before they go to Madrid, Hong Kong, Singapore, which is normally the ones where they do well. If they don't do well there, 2 years in the job, last year they ended 7th, I think they're currently 10th on the log this year. If they want to get rid of him, they'll have more than enough reason to do it. But like I said, also an experienced assistant coach with him, so we have to look at the bigger picture, maybe give him some more experienced players. But yeah, if they do decide to let him go, which I hear that it's quite a reality maybe towards the end of the season, I won't be surprised.
Sure. Yeah, now I want us to look at maybe the better performing side. We were all just so elated at the performance of the women's team last time around. A huge congratulations, of course, to what Ranford Dazel has been able to do with the team. It seems like with the women's program, a little bit more coordinated. What do you think they have gotten right? And what is it going to take for the women to actually become one of the top ranked teams in the world?
I think they still have some way to go before they'll be ranked as one of the top teams in the world, but they've definitely done well under somebody who you'll also remember. Ranford Dazel was actually on the shortlist for the Blitzboks job. That went to Sandile Ngobo. He then got the women, and look what he's doing, because he was assistant coach to Neil Powell. That experience is now playing out in the women's team, and they're doing well. So I think if they decide to let Sandile Ngobo go later this year, somebody like Ranford Dazel who's doing so well with the women, he'll be the perfect guy to take over. But obviously, the women's rugby has progressed in leaps and bounds over the last couple of years. Not only the sevens, the 15s as well, we have to mention, are doing quite well. But the sevens, when they got the opportunity at the tournaments, they're not going to win the World Seven Series by any means of the imagination, probably. But they've done well. They've qualified for the Olympic Games. That was always, the criticism that not enough resources are going to women's rugby or sevens rugby in particular. And now we've seen with their limited resources what they're capable of. So should they get, for example, permanent contracts, more resources, I think they'll only go do better and better in future.
And of course, it is time, for something like that to happen, to make sure that they are professionalized, as sporting athletes. But also what is a little disappointing is, yes, you find that the women do qualify for the quarterfinals like in their last outing. But when they do play their playoff matches, it really isn't convincing. I mean, that 53-0 loss, really a different identity to how we saw them qualify. Where is the improvement supposed to happen when you look at instances of that nature?
Definitely, you'll have to offer them money. So if you offer a young girl coming out of school a part-time contract to play sevens rugby, or she has the opportunity to go and study at university and get a degree and a nice paying job in a couple of years, what do you think she's going to choose? So let's make it, financially viable for young girls or the current girls in the squad to say, okay, it's my job now. I'm going to give it all I've got. I'm getting paid a nice salary. Let me work on my skills, but you can't expect that from somebody who's still a student, somebody who still has to go to work between 8 and 5 and only get to practice after 6 this evening. So I think if you pump in more money might not solve all the problems, but I think it will be a step in the right direction for our ladies, because really they've shown with the limited resources that they have what they are capable of, and if we invest more, surely they can only do better.
I mean, just before I let you go, Jody, it would be interesting to know from you, like, who is in charge of the sevens program? Does that fall under the director of rugby, Rassie Rasmus? And what do they have to say about these contrasting fortunes of the two teams? Because surely it's not a good look to have this one team, as we try to reestablish a connection there with Jody Hendricks, just speaking on the contrasting fortunes of the Blitzboks and the Blitzboks women. But of course, we were, just posing that final question, because it would be interesting to see how that sevens program is taking these recent performances. When you look at the contrasting fortunes of both the men's and the women's programs, it does not have a good look when you have the one team that is really struggling at their lowest at the point, and of course when you have one team that has qualified, which is of course the women's teams. But we need to thank Jody Hendricks there for giving us insight into what's happening with sevens rugby.